Great. Well, welcome again to this information session on the curricular analytics community. My name is Stephanie Foote. You can call me Steph, and I'm joined today by some wonderful colleagues. I'll let them introduce themselves. Brandon or Rob, would you like to go next?
Sure. It's great to see everybody. I'm Brandon Smith. I'm a senior associate vice president at the Gardner Institute. Really excited to have a nice big group to talk about curricular analytics today. As Steph alluded to, it is one of our favorite things to get to collaborate on, and we're always excited to share this particular group of resources and this opportunity with institutions. So I'll pass the mic to Rob Rodier.
Hi there. My name is Rob Rodier. I'm the Associate VP of Technology, Informatics, and Data Security, but this is one of my favorite things that I do. And I'll just keep it there. Welcome, and so excited to see so many people here.
Excellent. Thank you both, Brandon and Rob. As Brandon and Rob both said, this is one of my favorite things too. My role at the Gardner Institute is Vice President for Teaching, Learning, and Evidence-Based Practices, and this is one of many things I get to work on, but definitely one of my very favorite. We have two other Gardner Institute colleagues who are joining us today, helping to manage the behind-the-scenes work, Katie Luck and Brittany Connor. Brittany is moderating our event today, and Katie will be sharing some information about the Gardner Institute offerings. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I did want to let everyone know that we will, if we can, we'll turn on cameras and mics if you wish to show yourself and speak later on in the session. Though if you have questions or comments before then, we would welcome them, but please use the chat and we'll be happy to address those as they come in. And we'll also ask you in just a few moments to share a little bit about your reason for being here, your why. So be thinking about that. We're going to invite you to share some information. Because there's so many of us today, we won't go around to do introductions, but you are welcome if you would like to share a little bit about yourself in the chat as well. So first, we're going to start with some information about the Gardner Institute. Katie, did you want to take that or would you like me to?
I'm happy to do that, Steph. Hello, everyone. I apologize for not being on camera. My internet's a little unstable, so it works better this way. I just want to tell a little bit about the Gardner Institute. We are a 26, I think we're nearly 27 now, year old nonprofit located in Brevard, North Carolina, which is just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. And we work with institutions who are looking to improve student services in a variety of ways. And our statement is here, and we'll let you read that. But we're just excited to have you all here and learn a little bit about the work that the Gardner Institute does, specifically around curricular analytics and how we can help you improve student success.
Thank you so much, Katie. So we're going to be talking about our curricular analytics community. That's the primary focus of this particular information session, but we'll also share a little bit of information about some of the other things that are available through the Gardner Institute. And I say things because we have a number of different types of engagements. So we have communities of practice, and we have academies, and we have processes. And so we'll share a little bit more about that later on. But what I want to start with before we talk about the specifics of the curricular analytics community is to provide a little bit of context for this. So on the screen is an image of an article that appeared in the Chronicle of Higher Education in 2021. This is when we began to pilot the work that we'll be talking about in our curricular analytics community. The title of the article is a question: is your degree program too complicated? That's the first headline here. And I have to tell you that the answer is yes, because most of our degree programs are indeed too complicated, meaning it's difficult for students sometimes to graduate within a timely fashion. Often there is unnecessary complexity, although as you will hear us say many times today, that complexity, as we'll share with you, is not necessarily good or bad. But what we found in the work that we do is that there are scenarios where there's undue complexity that causes students to not graduate in a timely fashion, as I mentioned, or to accumulate credits, more credits that they need. So there are a lot of consequences for this. What I want to invite you all to do now, if you would, is to share with us the why for your participation today. So why, other than you want to learn about the curricular analytics community, but is there something that compels you to this particular work? Have you had a chance to maybe play around with some curricular analytics tools? Are you observing some issues? Are you going through a process where you need to do some curricular optimization? What is it that brings you here today? What is your why? And I'll give you a few moments to share that with us in the chat. And welcome to those who've just joined. We'll be sharing a copy of the recording and the slides with you all after this session is over. And we just invited everyone to share their why in the chat. All right, we've got some popping up. Zavaret said, I believe we have some barriers that make it difficult for the population we serve. Excellent. You are not alone. There are many of them. Let's see. Corey said, our provost is always interested in some optimization. So thinking about ways to optimize the curricula. Gabriel said, I've seen students really struggle making progress through degree pathways. And I think simplicity and clarity in the curriculum would help. Absolutely. Curricular optimization captures it best. Thank you, Kathleen. Sue, our program has a very long wait list looking at barriers. Jason, new to curricular analytics, but interest stems from guided pathways. Excellent. And let's see, Janine. Oh, yes, you'll be working with us. Absolutely. Good to see you. Susan, trying to create four-year roadmaps. And Elaine, better understand student pathways. And Pamela, interested in supporting student success in their online studies. And Jennifer, students who are in my program are now different than students in the past. That is absolutely the truth. There are many different needs. Well, thank you all, and please continue to share your why if you would like to. So the why for this work. So next we want to share a bit about the Academy. So this is an interesting sort of arrangement because we have the curricular analytics community kind of spans a few different program types at the Gardner Institute. This is an academy in that we have a formal engagement and then we have a community practice that follows. So I think it's the best of both worlds. So the CAC, that's what we call the Curricular Analytics Community, provides an opportunity for you all to look at curricular analytics using curricular visualization tools, which I'll share in a few moments. My good colleague Brandon will demonstrate, and an improvement science set of tools or methodology to help you actually do something about the things that you are observing. So as you find those problems of practice, potentially as you're finding the barriers or blockers, you can use the tools to engage colleagues in conversation about what you might do differently. And after the initial period of engagement, then we move into the community practice where we have a few periodic meetings to check in and find out what we're doing and also to share with each other where we might be experiencing some blockers, where we need some help. In addition to what we do in the initial formal engagement, we have both in that formal engagement throughout the year ongoing support. So we can provide technical support around the curricular visualization tools, but also practice-based support to help you all as you are using the improvement science methodology with your colleagues. So we're here for you. You'll receive guidance from us for the CAC team. We have another colleague, Ethan Campbell, who'll be joining us as well. We're onboarding him. He's been with us for a long time, but he hasn't worked in the curricular analytics space. But because we have such a demand for CAC, we're bringing in some new folks to help join us. And then we'll also have a platform. We have a platform and a learning management system that you all will have access to throughout the duration of the year. And this will give you a chance to not only upload curricula that you will look at during the time that we have our formal engagement, but later on, if you want to upload other programs of study, you can do that. There's no limit on those. So that way you can create maps for all of your programs if you want to. We've had a few institutions that have done just that. So next, we want to talk about go to the next slide, and I'm going to turn over to my colleague, Rob, the approach. So the topics and the focus that we take in the curricular analytics community. Rob?
Sure, thank you. So we use improvement science as a framework for taking a look at both the program of study that you want to look at and how it is situated inside of your institution, the larger organization. And so there's plenty of opportunity to do this. We like to start, it's not on here, but like by asking you, why are you here? What is your philosophy for even participating in this effort? And some of it I see is kind of being shared. Thank you with the chat. Um, but then from there, we want to like make sure that you're not just here so you can tick a box or because somebody said be there. We want you to take some time to think about, what do you want to get out of this? And how do you want to apply that in the future to the program of study or whatever other efforts that you can, both within your locus of control, or how do you bring others into this effort to improve student success at your institution? Um, and we of course orient all of these discussions sort of around these visualizations and the discussions around your program of study. So we use some tools for some problem identification, some root cause analysis. There's some visualization tools there, and then there's the awesome tool that we have that we affectionately, refer to as spaghetti and meatballs visualizations that will sort of let you look at the how your program is visualized. Um, and then there's some other tools that we use to decide where you will sort of consider, given some of the causes for this, the things that you see, how can you drive improvement? Where are the levers for change? And then we'll ask you to, take that and figure out how to do some sort of PDSA or start a continuous improvement cycle. It doesn't have to be 90 days. It can be less. There's the 90-day handbook that we have linked as a resource, but you can always do a 5-day, 10-day. There's lots if you start, Googling or asking your other friends for examples, they're a lot shorter that you can do. And given the environment that we're in, 90 days is like sort of you have an outcome that you can look at. So how do you break that up to look within that? And then we want to also ask you to do some presentation of artifacts and your plan forward. So at the end, we do want you to do a sharing out of what you've learned and what you're going to do next. Steph, Brandon, what did I miss?
I think you covered it all very nicely. Thank you, Rob. And now
Yeah,
we're going to move into looking at the approach. I mentioned a few times the curricular visualizations, the maps, and I'm going to turn it over to Brandon. He's going to talk a little bit about this, but then also jump into the platform to show you what this looks like in real time. So you'll have a chance to see just how dynamic the maps are, so you'll know better what to expect from the tools that we'll be using. Brandon?
thanks, Steph and Rob. Hey everybody, thanks so much for spending part of your afternoon with us. So when we think about the way that curricular connections related to prerequisites are currently visualized at our institution, I think at least my experience serving at a couple of different institutions was that information was locked in a catalog or online somewhere, and it wasn't always totally clear the impact of the relationships between courses related to prereqs and how that might be either supporting or hindering student progress. And so the tool that we're about to share with you is really focused on trying to make those connections visible for your team so that they can do some what if scenarios and also just ask questions about how learning and support and resources are scaffolded for students to support them along these pathways that are really, in most cases, just absolutely critical for student progress toward degree completion. And because they're not always visualized, like it says here in the slide, in some cases they haven't necessarily been really analyzed or, dare we say, optimized. So that's the opportunity before us that we will weave into the improvement science work that Rob was sharing earlier. Next slide, please. So Rob alluded to the fact that what we're interested in is looking at outputs associated with the current curriculum that you have. So asking the question, if we have certain undesired outputs within a program of study, whether those things are things like current retention rates, graduation rates, time to graduation, or excess credit accumulation upon graduation, those four lagging measure outputs are all correlated in the literature to essentially addressing curricular complexity. And so those are four things that we highly recommend folks look at. But what we find is that those are really the outputs. And so we want to understand what all the causes of those outputs are as we think about how we might change our systems to better support student progression and success. Next slide, please. So I'm going to jump right in to sharing these four elements, but these are four quantitative measures associated with curricular complexity. And it's easier to just show you the actual maps to talk through this. So thanks, Steph. And I'll share my screen. I've got it already pulled up. Oh, there we go. Share. So, well, excuse me. This is our platform. And what I'm going to do here is everyone who registers for the Curricular Analytics has access to this. And this is a program of study. So I'm going to talk through kind of what you get right off the bat when you load one of your programs in. Now, you load these programs using a .csv file, which is essentially an Excel document. And to build one by hand typically takes 60 to 90 minutes. We can certainly help with some of that too if you engage in this. We've been doing some testing with trying to automate some of that process. So reach out if you're having any issues with that. But you're going to see right here in this example program, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You've got the title that the institution gets to put in, the number of credit hours for this program of study, and then the overall complexity. And everyone, the first question they ask is that good or bad? And like Steph said, it's neither right now. But what it is correlated with some of those outcomes that you might want to change, like the grad rate, the retention rate, time to graduation, excess credit accumulation. So as you start to address the root causes of those four outcomes, either through directly reducing the complexity by changing your curriculum or addressing student success in these highly complex nodes, you should see an increase in those student success measures. So let's talk about what each of these maps includes, right? So this particular map has our 8 terms of study that are traditional. If you got a fall and spring terms, but you can set this up to have as many terms as your program has if you do quarters or anything else. And so for each term at the bottom, you see the overall complexity, right? And typically, complexity drops off around the junior year. And you can even see right here that we've got higher complexity, 28, 35, 19, and then it starts to go down as we move further into the curriculum. Essentially, that means there are fewer connections that are or dependencies as we go through, right? But that early on, a student cannot advance to, in this case, 9 courses until they pass Accounting 284. So let's talk about these metrics and where that complexity comes from. So blocking factor, the one I just talked about, is saying how many courses are blocked when a student is unable to pass this course. In this case, it's 9. And then the delay factor takes our longest chain, essentially across terms, and says, what is the largest number of terms on a chain associated with this course? Again, why those two things matter is these 9 courses are inaccessible until a student is successful in this class. And then with the delay factor, again, if a course, let's say a course is even offered every semester, every course is offered every semester, which is probably unlikely for most of us. But if it were, that still means that if a student is misadvised or is unable to get into a section or doesn't pass a section or anything else in life gets in the way of their progress on this chain, they will essentially have to take an entire additional semester anytime they're not successful on that chain, up to 6 times. And this is where that credit accumulation and time to graduation really, really comes from. Some other things you'll notice, and I'm just interacting with this, is that everything's gray until you hover over or click on a course. This is actually a graphic user interface. It's not static. So again, the complexity by term is just the sum of each circle is a course. It's saying the sum in this term of the complexity, which is the blocking factor plus the delay factor, is 15, right? 9 plus 6 is 15. And then that's in the center of this node. You add all those up to understand just how many dependencies are really present in this term. And the higher that number, essentially the fewer choices students have, or the less wiggle room they have related to staying on the pathway. Other things here, you'll notice that the last metric is this centrality measure, and that's just graph centrality. It's looking at how many roads in and how many roads out associated with this course related to complexity. And it's trying to get a sense of, right, the complexity and the blocking factor associated with this course. Here, what we're really talking about is, when it's got a really high centrality, it means that after a student succeeds in this course, more coursework tends to open up to them. And this is critical because highly central courses typically happen later in the study. And for that reason, there's often less support because it's not a traditional gateway class necessarily. But that doesn't mean it's not a really important class, especially for transfer students. So this is, in a nutshell, the curricular complexity platform that we have. It's worth letting you know that you can create copies of any curriculum that you build. And once you do that, you can actually do some what if scenarios. Additionally, as your team is first jumping in here, you can look at all this in a table and you can say, well, where is my highest centrality? Oh, it's accounting 386, 301, 497, and 387. Where is my highest complexity? Oh, it's 284. And so your teams can very quickly start to hone in on some of these problems of practice, these challenges, as part of the guided inquiry that we walk you through. So that's the first use case. When you read about quote unquote curricular complexity, this is almost always what we're talking about in the literature. However, there are two other variations, and I'll be really quick on these because once your team starts to build these out for a program of study, right? Accounting, theater, your education program, some institutions may say, well, we want to look at a transfer ecosystem. We want to look at what it looks like for students from our 2-year institution to transfer to a 4-year institution, or we want to look, at the 4-year institution, the 2-year institution to the 4-year institution, either way. This is an example map of that. And essentially it shows you what students are encouraged to take here at the 2-year school. You can see it's actually, each of these courses is labeled. And then what happens when they transfer here after the first year, right? And a couple of things worth pointing out, like the math. This is an old map. They've actually completely changed the curriculum at these two institutions as part of this work. But what they found was the faculty were kind of unaware. It makes sense to have students take math right off the bat. That way they can retake it if they need to. However, the math course here, this variable calculus, wasn't being applied for 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a summer term, but 5, 6, 7 terms. We're literally talking about a couple of years between the student taking math and then applying it at the 4-year institution. Now, students at the 4-year institution could access these courses much sooner because the only dependency was this math class. So that was something that the faculty were like, well, that's not ideal. Another big gap here, we've got a whole year, but the students taking this biology 207, or this chem class is a better example. The chem class created a lot of dependencies for the students right after they got there because these courses were gateways for almost everything else here. And so even though you could theoretically move some of these courses over, no matter what, the students were going to have to be full-time and probably access aid. They were going to have to fill their schedules with things they just didn't need because of the prerequisite dependencies that were for the 4-year students spread across all these other terms. So this is the reality of what our transfer students, even when articulation agreements are in place, sometimes we don't recognize some of the unintended consequences. So the transfer variation is huge and can serve, number one, for your own institution, but better yet, if you partner with another institution, it can open up some really interesting conversations. The last variant that we love, this is a new one. This one's maybe a little over a year old. But these are taking a single course across all programs of study at your institution. So this is an algebra course that blocks 204 courses at this institution. So that means 204 courses across all the majors are not accessible if a student doesn't pass algebra. What's also really interesting is that in some majors, there is no room for error. It is an 8-course sequence starting with algebra. That alone tells you that this is really high stakes and might be, as Steph said at the beginning, too complex. What's fun is to go to a terminal node like this and work your way backwards. This is one of our 8-term connections, right? Going from algebra to chem to bio to another bio to another bio to another bio, to these ATEPs. So you get the idea, but it's really a fascinating additional use case. And if you join us for curricular analytics, your team has access to all of this for the year. So even though we've got the course in the very beginning, and I say course, it's we call them synchronous meetings. But we'll be meeting with your teams as a group starting January 29th for about 8 weeks. And then in addition to that, you have access to our team all the time. So we're happy to meet, but this is something that some of our institutions, they start with a program and then they get hooked on it like we are, and they just keep building lots of different use cases. So all of this is available to you through the one engagement. Back to you, Steph.
Thank you so much, Brandon. Let's pause here to see if there are questions because we've just shared quite a bit of information, including information about the curricular analytics community and how we approach this work and the curricular visualization tools. Diana,
So,
yeah,
yep.
you got it. Thank
Multiple
you.
options. Yeah. So the way we do that is when there are multiple options, Diana, if all of the options serve the same prereq, so in other words, you can take this or this or this or this, the complexity won't change. And we actually just list all of the options under the annotations. And then if, for example, if I take course A, it serves as a prerequisite for all of these things. But if I take course B, then we just create another copy of it and we map both of those variants. So it allows you to essentially account for all variations pretty quickly, because again, when you make the copies, and I didn't demo it, but since it's a graphic user interface, you can just delete or change things with a stroke of the mouse.
And I just want to add one other thing. Depending on what that, if not one-to-one, but one-to-many type relationship is, there's a way for you to use some annotations in there so that if there's, say, 30 options for the student, you can begin to visualize through at least the naming and listing of these things, what type of other complexity you have provided for the students, given the number of options they may have. And I think you probably mentioned it, but there may be 30 options, and if you take 10 of them, you can the student may be able to get the degree they wanted. If for some reason, without because the student didn't know, if they took any of the 20 others, the degree they were intending to pursue is knocked out of their options in the next term unless they sort of back up and take something else. That's something to keep in mind when you're listing or considering, how you name or what you put in that annotation for the number of options.
The next question has to do with the usefulness of the tool for two-year institutions, and we can speak to that directly. So in the chat, I said, yes, it's helpful for both 2- and 4-year institutions. But to just give you an example of how helpful it is, I know that there are some folks with us who are from 2-year institutions, including some that we'll be working with in the spring from QCC. So as you are thinking about this engagement, so being involved with us in curricular analytics, there are a lot of different ways that we can, I think, use the tool or the process to be helpful to you. So first of all, in the example that Brandon shared, the first example, like the primary use case, we're looking at degree programs. And I know sometimes at your institutions, they may not look that complex. But if we decide to look at it at your transfer institution, so where your students are transferring to, that's one of the other use cases that Brandon shared, or we're mapping your 2-year program to a 4-year program. So if institutions that your students are transferring to, that you're a feeder institution for, that are receiving your transfer students, we can take a look at those and map those curricula so you can see completely what it looks like from the 2-year to the 4-year. So what the entire pathway looks like. And that can be really eye-opening because oftentimes there are long chains, as Brandon's example illustrated, where the transfer students aren't applying knowledge, that they have prerequisite knowledge, and then they're not reapplying it until 2, 4, 8 semesters later, however many semesters it is later. So we could have long chains that need to be addressed. And then there are also complexity walls, as again, as Brandon demonstrated, that transfer students experience often early in transfer. So they're hitting the wall, they're taking courses that they often have very complicated, I don't want to say killer course combinations, but that is a term that we could use early in their transfer experience. So after they get to the 4-year institution, sometimes it's very difficult for them because they're facing that quote unquote killer course combination. So they may have some of the most demanding courses together. So those are all ways that we can look at this. So mapping your curricula at the 2-year institution and then looking at those transfer pathways. Brandon, Rob, anything to add to that? Nope, we've covered it all. Are there other questions or comments from anyone before we move on? We will have time at the end, we promise. But if there's anything that we can answer right now, we would be happy to do that. Anything else we could answer?
And Steph, can I just have 1 second to
Of
share my screen
course.
again? I just want to show folks just how easy. So this is a transfer map and I just started playing with it, but this is what I meant by you can literally go in and make edits like this, where if I think, we really need to better distribute some of these courses, right? You can go in and start to say, well, what would happen if we move this? Or what happens if we start to teach this course at the 2-year level? Right. So that's literally what I'm doing with this particular institution right now is they recognize that they need this 4-year needs to send more of its 2-year, more of the courses into the 2-year space to better help students move through at pace. And so this is an example of how you can do that. So you can add courses, edit what you've got here, change prereqs. It's all, once you get it built, it is very much a sandbox to start testing things.
Yeah. Thank you, Brandon. And we do have a number of 2-year institutions that have worked with us, quite a number of them, and including one that mapped all of their curricula, which was pretty
Right.
amazing. So they did a lot when they were with us in the formal engagement, and then over a period of the rest of the year, they mapped the rest of their curricula. So cool stuff. We want to share with you all a few more. We've already kind of alluded to some of these case examples. We'll get to these, and we also have some case studies on our webpage as well that we want to direct you to. I see there's another question. We should answer this one. With well over half of our associate degree students attending part-time, will we have ways to map pathways to completion that are not term dependent? And yes, I think Brandon mentioned you can add many more terms if you need to. So there are a lot of different ways that we can look at this depending on, what scenario we're considering. So there is some flexibility in the tool itself. Brandon, did you want to add to that?
I was just saying, yeah, it's the terms are really just a sort of a bucket that you can put things in. So for example, if students are taking a number of these in concurrent spaces or, however you want to look at it, you can map for that.
Yep.
The idea is to just show the sort of sequencing of these courses so that we can understand where the bottlenecks exist, because I think it is a rare thing to work with faculty and staff on this and to not see something that was new. So that's part of the opportunity here, is to basically be able to visualize this and then start to ask, as you just did, what happens when ...
Yeah, and we don't want to get too far into the weeds, but in the improvement science tools and methodology that you'll be invited to use, you'll also be considering the system. So I think that that's important when we talk about part-time students, to think about how they're being served within the existing system. And so we have an inquiry guide, which Brandon mentioned, And using, different protocol like 5 Whys and Fishbone, we'll be able to, really understand what's happening here, to have you all to understand what's really happening. So I think that that will be very helpful too. So as I mentioned, we have some different institutional examples. We won't spend a lot of time on these. Again, you'll have a copy of the slides, but we just want to share these, and again, the case studies on our webpage, because often we get questions like, well, how would I use the curricular analytics community-related work? So not just the visualizations, but the entire process. And as you can see here, there are a few different disciplinary examples. So we have examples from art, the first one, 2D, 3D, where they eliminated some legacy prerequisites. And this is not uncommon. We have a number of institutions that have worked with us that discovered legacy prerequisites. And it was, thank you, Katie, for putting our webpage in the chat. We appreciate that. So it was somewhat of a quick win for them because they were able to reduce some complexity just by taking out some prerequisites that were no longer needed. And I think that probably this is clear from what Brandon shared, but what we're mapping here are the pre and co-requisite relationships. So we know that pre and co-requisites make a big difference in terms of students' access to courses. And sometimes we don't revisit those prerequisites on a regular basis. So just removing those that are no longer valid or applicable, those legacy prerequisites. Also, not necessarily up here, but one of the other sort of quick wins has to do with course offerings and the schedule for those offerings. So looking at course rotation in context, of the curricular analytics work that you're doing can be very important and also can maybe be a bit of a quick win. So to look at when classes are offered. We have an engineering example, a biology example, and then the campus-wide example, which is also reflected in our case studies on our webpage, uses curricular analytics to evaluate some existing programs and to determine whether or not the program should be continued. So thinking about combining existing programs or refining existing programs, so some of the curricular optimization that we've talked about. So just a little bit more about those use cases that Brandon highlighted. So we have the first one is mapping the curricular structures that exist within a program of study. So we're looking at pre and co-requisite relationships in a course of study, so a program of study. That is intended to help improve student completion of a program of study. So if you are thinking, how can we get more students to complete this program? How can we keep more of our students so they'll eventually complete the program? That's one of the primary use cases. Then transfer student success, so improving the success of transfer students, so creating those transfer maps that Brandon showed. And then the connections between gateway courses and the rest of the curricula. So those are the three different types of curricular analytics that we do in the Gardner Institute in our curricular analytics community. Most of our focus is on the orange box, if you can see the screen, where we're looking at those programs of study. But if you are interested, we can help you with the transfer maps and with the gateway course maps. That will be part of the experience if you would like it to be. All right. Now I think I'm going to turn it over to my good colleague, Brandon, to talk about who should be involved in these efforts. Brandon?
Thanks, Steph. Yeah, I mean, when we think about this, every institution's a little different, but it's traditionally very useful if you're studying a program to have some faculty. So the academic affairs side of the house is really critical because they are going to know the space inside and out. But also having folks from across the institution, one of our absolute home run institutions from last year had the registrar in the space, right? So registrars, admission, faculty in the student support area, advisors, retention specialists, reaccreditation teams. So there's really a wide group, and we would be happy if you're interested in talking about, clarifying who's on the team. But regardless, as you run your first program or two through this, sharing this information out with some of these other groups, even if they're not directly related in the sort of day-to-day work of it, is really critical as you're trying to build momentum and expand the use. But yeah, I mean, it's really an opportunity for lots of different folks at your institution to lean in, even, dare I say, students. as they confirm what it is like to walk these paths.
Thank you, Brandon. And to that point, we've had a number of students who've been involved, and some have also been involved in the data entry process as well. So the data that we use in curricular analytics is catalog data, so publicly available data, but prepared in a CSV file. And Brandon mentioned it takes about 60 to 90 minutes sometimes to create each of those visualizations and the files. So institutions have used students to help with that, but they've also
Mhm.
used students to get the elicit student voice about the experience because obviously, sometimes we're looking at the ideal or we're looking at different scenarios. It's helpful to hear from the students themselves. So that student voice can be very useful. It's always useful, but I think in this case, it can be particularly useful to add nuance to the situation. So to understand better what it looks like, the lived experience of students. All right, and now I'm going to turn it over to Katie to share some information about the application and fees for those who have not yet applied. I see there's a question in the chat. Is it possible to look at how the core and gen ed curricula interact with programs? Yes. So we could map your gen ed curricula. So we could do that or your core. So there are a lot of different ways to look at that. And then also we can create different versions of those gateway course maps if there's certain courses within the core gen ed that you'd like to examine relationships between. I think Katie's having trouble with her microphone right now. So, oh, you're welcome, Elaine. I'm going to go ahead and cover this information for her, and she'll let us know if she has any additions in the chat. So Brandon mentioned we have synchronous meetings, and those meetings are during the formal engagement every week. And we have different periods of time that we meet. So it's either we alternate between 1 hour and then 90 minutes, so an hour and a half. And the reason we do this is because during those 90-minute sessions, they're considered to be more applied in that we have more practice time together. So during each of our weekly meetings, we will have a short presentation. Brandon, Rob, and I will make the presentation. And then we'll have an opportunity for you all to do some practicing together as a team. So you'll have a team breakout, and then we'll move around each of the breakout rooms. We'll pop in and pop out to help support you all. And that's intended to give you a little bit of time to work through some of this, but also you'll need to find time outside of this to continue the work. But this is to give you a little bit of space to do that. So those are our synchronous meeting dates and times. And just so you know, we'll record each of the synchronous meetings. So during that presentation part, we'll be recording, we'll post that in our learning management system about 24 to 48 hours afterwards. So you'll have a chance to review that if you're unable to join us, or even if you'd like to just review it to catch up on something you might have missed. The fee information is determined by College Navigator based on enrollment. So you can see that on the right-hand side of the screen. I know that some of you have already applied and have an agreement, so you don't need to worry about this. But if you're considering being a part of our spring cohort, this information would apply to you. And you can split your fee payment up over different years too. If you'd like to pay some and pay some more later after the end of the fiscal year and into the new fiscal year, we can make that happen as well. So please let us know if you have questions about that. But that's the fee information. So it's by institution and not per individual. And you can have about 15 people on your team too, just in case we haven't said that. So that's quite a big number of people. And if you needed one or two more, we could probably make that happen, but that's a pretty large number. So you could have 15 involved in this work during your formal engagement. Here's some more information about our processes and academies, not all of them, because I think we have more than 30 now. But these are some of the highlights of what we offer that you might be interested in. And if you are interested in any of these offerings, you can contact us at info@gardnerinstitute.org. And my good colleague Katie or Brittany will be in touch, and we can have an info session with you all or a personal meeting with you all to talk about any of these offerings that we have. Applications for our multi-year processes are available on our platform. And then we have a lot, obviously, on our website. But do reach out if you have any questions or if you're unsure of where you might kind of fit within all of the different offerings. Maybe you're not sure if the curricular analytics community is the right fit. but you want to do something with us, just let us know. We'll be happy to help you find the right fit. And you're very welcome, Kate. And then we do have, I want to highlight this. I should have updated this, I see, but I do want to highlight one thing that's on the screen that's coming up. We have a fantastic workshop that I'm looking forward to in January, and I'll be there with my good colleagues, Brandon and Rob. So if you didn't get enough today, come and spend more time with us in person in Asheville, North Carolina, January 26th and 27th. And that workshop is focused on transforming the transfer experience, which is includes highlights from a book that was published in 2020. And we've expanded upon that. There are a couple of sessions that address curricular analytics. One session, Brandon, Rob, and I will be presenting. So transfer curricular analytics. So if anyone is interested in that in particular, please consider joining us, and we'll be happy to share registration information with you. And now we would love to hear from you. If you have any questions about anything that we've shared or something that we haven't shared about the curricular analytics community, we would love to answer your questions, and we can also pause the recording if you would like, so you don't have to be recorded for prosperity.
Thanks, Steph. Two things I wanted to just point out from the chat. Someone had messaged me individually, but also going back to Elaine's piece about mapping the gen ed. Elaine, in addition to mapping the gen ed across programs and studies, I think we would probably also recommend mapping some of the gen ed as though they are gateway courses, especially the ones that are early in sequence, because at some institutions we have found that there are connections that are truly hidden from the faculty. One institution in particular recently mapped an English course that blocked over 200 courses. And at first they said, this can't be right. And it's like, well, it's not the direct connection between this English course. It's all the connections after it. So if English is blocking a high complexity course within the major that blocks 3, 4, 5 other courses, those things might be hidden from the faculty who are considering sort of the importance here. So there are a couple of different ways that we might want to look at the gen eds. And then the other question someone asked, how is this different from the version that's available right now online? So both the sort of free version that's at curricularanalytics.org and the community were developed by the same folks. It's two of our fellows, Dr. Greg Heileman and Shawi Abdullah. And our version has a little bit of additional functionality, but the big add-on are the frameworks with the improvement science, the access to our team, and access to our platform, which allows you to do a few things that the free version doesn't have built in. We've had some institutions who literally mapped every program at their institution, sat on them for 2 years, and then came to do the curricular analytics because it's one thing to build the maps. It's another to go through a stepwise process of inquiry to say, what are the root causes associated with the challenges students are facing that relate to this complexity? And that's what this process does.
Brandon and Rob, there's another question from Jocelyn in the chat. Is it possible to use this tool to compare major and minor pathways? And the answer is yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yep. And you can even compare to your peers if you want to load that information, because most of the requirements are an institution's catalog. The expertise and the knowledge that you have of the internal, maybe unstated requirements of the program and how that works better helps with this process. But this doesn't require like a big data lift, as in involving your institutional researcher or somebody to download something. At least if you're just going to do one or two. If you're going to do the rest is sort of up to you, but this is meant to be sort of a light data lift. It's the inquiry piece in the conversations where it starts getting deep and sticky, perhaps.
And Katie, oh, go ahead. I don't know, Katie, if we can make it so folks can unmute to make it easier for them to ask questions, but we can keep working through what's in the chat. We've got one that says, how does the tool take placement into account, like math placement in some majors? Well, if it's a course, you add a node, because that means that there might be expectations of prereqs before they get to the credit bearing courses. So you've got to add that in to show the reality that if a student is not, let's say, algebra ready and they have to take 2 courses before they get there, something's got to fill those terms. And so you create variations with those things. And again, once you have a base map built, creating those variants is really just a matter of sliding courses around.
Yeah, as Brandon mentioned, creating different versions of the map so you can share, if somebody is Calc ready or college algebra ready or whatever it is that the placement indicates. So having different versions. So create the base map and then create different versions, Calc ready, not Calc ready. And that's how we advise institutions to do it. Elaine had a question about preserving the map. So there is the possibility, if you're just with us for curricular analytics, if you're in other processes like our macro transformation process, then you have access during the duration of the 5 years that you work with us. Yeah, 5 years, a long time. But if you're just with us for curricular analytics, you have 1 year, and then there is a subscription possibility, which I don't want to say the rate out loud because I could very well be wrong, but I check on it every time and it's always a very low rate, like $1,000 or $1,500. It's quite low. So
Yep.
there is an opportunity for you to gain access to that, continue access through a subscription fee, a very small subscription fee after the time.
And the idea behind this is that you whomever you send to this is trained up on the methodology and the tools well enough that they can expand it at your institution. So if you do opt to do the subscription so that this is something you want to do in perpetuity, it's very affordable.
Yeah.
And you've got a group of people at your institution that can sort of help to expand it. We have a number of institutions that pay that subscription fee because this is baked into program review.
Mm-hmm.
Like every 5 years they're sending programs through this, and so they've just got it running all the time because again, they find that for that extension price, once they understand how to use everything, it's got high value for them.
That's very true.
Thank
And I
you.
see that, okay. See, Katie put in the chat that you all can unmute and ask a question now. We've changed the settings. So please raise your hand and we'll give you permission to speak if you'd like to. Other questions or comments for us? I think you all have had the best questions of any info session so far this year. I see Elaine has a hand up. Elaine, would you like to speak?
Thank you. So you said something earlier about integrating student outcomes into the curricular maps. How do you go about doing that?
So there's a couple of ways. Let's say you want to measure the rates of D's, failures, withdrawals, and incompletes associated with a course so that you can track the impact of that course on student progression and those rates. You can add that straight into the maps using the annotation feature, and many of our institutions do that. You can also actually, there's some flexibility in the last 3 columns of the CSV file, and there is a character limit. We call it the Camasso rule, named after the person who found the character limit. But yeah, so you can integrate those things in because again, the maps are most useful when you look at student outcomes. So looking at things like DFWIs or retention, and inevitably you will find a course after, like let's say you've got 5 courses on that chain, right? That's the delay factor. Probably somewhere around the 3rd course, there's a high correlation with success in the class and graduation. And so then again, when we're thinking about redesign of those courses or reflection on the impact of those courses, you're really thinking about, so after that course, let's move back to the left and look at the first 3 courses together, because that is where we are probably, needing to do most of the work to try to help students progress. So there are a couple of different ways we can do it. Awesome, Elaine. I see the floating animated thumb.
There's nothing like that floating animated thumb.
It's ghostly.
I love it. Anything else you all would like to learn about? Related to curricular analytics, I should say, not just anything. Although we could try to answer anything. You never know what you get.
We know there's a big group who's already signed up at your institution, so you should have access to our onboarding site. But if for some reason you need access to that for the January 29th and you've already signed up, feel free to reach out to one of the three of us and we'll be sure it gets your way. But we're just really excited to start. We've got a nice group from a really diverse group of institutions starting in January. So it's going to be a lot of fun, folks. Hopefully, those of you who've already signed up are good to go. And those of you who might have questions about how to sign up or questions that weren't answered here, feel free to reach out to us anytime. We'll do what we can to help.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. And we'll stop the recording now and hang out for a couple of minutes just to see if there are any last questions.